The rifle crack split the Montana dawn as Caroline Mercer stood over three dead men, their blood staining the fresh snow crimson. Her wedding dress, if you could call the worn cotton that, was torn at the shoulder, revealing old battle scars. "Mail order bride," she spat at their corpses. "You should have read the fine print." Behind her, Ethan Calloway lowered his smoking gun, his eyes not on the bodies but on the warrior woman he'd chosen to marry just 3 days ago. "This is their story. Stay with me to the end and drop a comment about where you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled." The stagecoach lurched to a halt in Bitterhorn Ridge, Montana territory, sending a cloud of dust into the October air. Caroline Mercer didn't wait for the driver to open the door. She kicked it open herself, her worn boots hitting the ground with practiced silence, a soldier's habit that would never leave her bones. "That's her," she heard someone whisper. "The fourth one this month." Caroline didn't flinch. Let them whisper. Let them stare at the woman who stood 6 feet in her boots, whose hands bore calluses thick as leather, whose green eyes held the kind of 1,000-yard stare that belonged on battlefields, not in marriage advertisements. The town of Bitterhorn Ridge sprawled before her like a promise half-kept. False-fronted buildings lined the muddy main street, their painted signs already fading in the harsh Montana weather. The Grand Hotel, grand only in name, squatted on the corner, its windows watching her approach like eyes. Beyond the town, the mountains rose sharp and unforgiving, their peaks already white with early snow. She hefted her single carpet bag, ignoring the driver's offer of help. Inside that bag was everything she owned. 2 changes of clothes, a knife that had saved her life more times than she could count, $43, and a letter from a man named Ethan Calloway who'd answered her advertisement for marriage. The advertisement. Caroline almost laughed, remembering how she'd written it in a boarding house in Chicago, her hands shaking not from fear, but from barely controlled rage. "Woman of 28 years seeks matrimonial arrangement, can work hard, shoot straight, and keep quiet. No questions about the past required or welcomed. Willing to relocate immediately." She hadn't mentioned that she could field dress wounds better than most doctors. Hadn't mentioned the nightmares that woke her screaming. Hadn't mentioned that the last man who tried to force himself on her was buried in an unmarked grave outside Philadelphia. 3 men had already rejected her. The first had taken one look at her height and muscle and declared her unwomanly. The second had lasted 2 days before her refusal to simper and flutter sent him looking elsewhere. The third, a banker from Denver, had actually recoiled when she'd reflexively grabbed his wrist to stop him from striking a stable boy. "You're not what I expected in a bride," he'd said, his face pale. "There's something wrong with you." Wrong. Caroline touched the scar that ran along her jawline, mostly hidden by carefully arranged hair. If only he knew how wrong. The Bitterhorn Ridge Hotel's lobby smelled of tobacco and boiled cabbage. The clerk, a thin man with pomaded hair, looked up from his ledger. "You must be Miss Mercer," he said, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Mr. Calloway left word. He'll be by this evening." "Room?" Caroline asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Number 7. Top of the stairs, end of the hall." He slid a key across the counter, careful not to let their fingers touch. "Mr. Calloway paid for 3 nights in advance." 3 nights. Either Ethan Calloway was generous or he wanted time to change his mind. Caroline took the key and climbed the stairs, each step creaking under her weight. The hallway was narrow, papered in faded roses that looked like blood spots in the dim light from the single window. Room 7 was sparse but clean. An iron bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a chipped pitcher, a small mirror that reflected her face in wavy distortion. Caroline set down her bag and moved to the window. From here, she could see the entire main street, could track every person who passed below. Old habits. She pulled Calloway's latest letter from her pocket, though she'd already memorized every word. "Miss Mercer, your directness is refreshing. I am not looking for a parlor ornament or a delicate flower. My ranch requires someone who understands hard work and isolation. I've included a photograph. If you're still willing, I'll meet you in Bitterhorn Ridge on October 15th. E. Calloway." The photograph showed a man perhaps 5 years older than her, with dark hair and serious eyes. Not handsome in the classical sense, but there was something in his face, A weariness, maybe, or a recognition of pain that had made her write back immediately. Now she waited. Caroline washed the travel dust from her face and hands, changed into her better dress, brown wool, serviceable, with a high collar that hid most of her scars. She didn't bother with her hair beyond ensuring it was clean and pinned back. If Calloway wanted pretty, he'd chosen the wrong bride. The hours passed slowly. She watched the street, cataloging the routines of the town. The sheriff made his rounds at 2 and 6. The saloon across the street grew loud after 4. A group of ranch hands rode in around 5, dust-covered and rowdy. Normal frontier life, the kind she'd once dreamed of having before the war changed everything. The war. Even now, 20 years later, she couldn't think of it without her hands forming fists. She'd been 8 when it started, 12 when it ended. 4 years of running, hiding, fighting. 4 years of watching her mother waste away from grief after her father didn't come home from Antietam. 4 years of learning that sometimes little girls had to become something else to survive. After the war, she tried to return to normal life, tried to be the daughter her dying mother needed, but normal was a costume that no longer fit. At 16, she'd left home with a group of other orphans and outcasts, heading west with a wagon train. That's when she'd learned she was good at violence. Too good. The incident in Kansas had been self-defense. The one in Colorado, too. By the time she reached Chicago, Caroline had accepted what she was, a woman shaped by war, unsuited for civilized society. Marriage seemed like her last chance at something resembling a normal life, even if it was marriage to a stranger who'd answered her desperate advertisement. A knock at the door made her hand move instinctively to where her knife was hidden in her boot. She forced herself to relax, to move slowly to the door like a normal woman would. "Miss Mercer?" "It's Ethan Calloway." His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a slight rasp like he'd breathed too much smoke at some point. Caroline opened the door. He was taller than his photograph suggested, maybe 4 inches taller than her, with shoulders that spoke of physical work. His dark hair was damp, recently combed, and his clothes were clean but worn. The outfit of a man who'd made an effort, but didn't have much to work with. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray, like winter sky, with the same kind of shadows she saw in her own mirror. "Mr. Calloway." She didn't curtsy or simper, just stood aside to let him in. He entered, removing his hat, and she noticed how he automatically positioned himself to keep both the door and window in view, a soldier's habit, just like hers. "You're not what I expected," he said after a moment. Caroline's jaw tightened. "I can catch the morning stage if you've changed your mind." "No." The word came quick, almost surprised. "No, I mean, you're exactly what your letters suggested. Direct. Honest. I just—" He paused, studying her with those gray eyes. Most women wouldn't advertise those particular qualities. Most women haven't lived my life. "No," he agreed quietly. "I suppose they haven't." They stood there, 2 strangers measuring each other across the small room. Caroline noticed the way his left hand trembled slightly, an old injury maybe, or drink. She noticed the scar that disappeared into his collar, the way he held himself like he was ready for violence even in this quiet moment. "Would you join me for dinner?" he asked finally. "The hotel dining room is tolerable, and we should talk." Caroline nodded. She pinned on her hat, a plain brown thing that had seen better days, and followed him downstairs. The dining room was nearly empty, just an elderly couple in the corner and a traveling salesman absorbed in his newspaper. Calloway chose a table by the window but sat with his back to the wall. Another soldier's habit. They ordered beef stew for both, coffee, bread. When the food arrived, Caroline ate steadily, efficiently, wasting nothing. She caught Calloway watching and raised an eyebrow. "You eat like someone who's been hungry," he observed. "You eat like someone who's had to guard his plate," she countered, noting how his left arm stayed curved protectively around his bowl. A smile ghosted across his face. "Prison camp. Georgia. You?" "Everywhere. After my father died at Antietam, it was just my mother and me. Food was scarce." "How old were you?" 8 when he left, 9 when we got word." She took a sip of coffee, found it bitter but strong. You? 17 when I enlisted. Thought I was going to be a hero. His laugh was harsh. Ended up a medic, sawing off limbs in field hospitals. Then Andersonville happened. Andersonville. Caroline had heard the stories, the Confederate prison camp where thousands of Union soldiers died from starvation and disease. That explained the tremor in his hand, the way his eyes went distant sometimes. How long? She asked. 14 months? Would have been longer, but the war ended. He pushed his half-eaten stew away. After that, I couldn't go back to Ohio. Too many ghosts, came west in '68, bought land cheap from the railroad. Been alone ever since. Why change that now? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee. Winter's coming. My fourth alone out there. The land is good, the ranch is growing, but he met her eyes. Talking to the cattle doesn't help anymore. And there's trouble coming. The railroad wants to push through my valley, and they don't much care that I have legal claim. A man alone is an easy target. A man with a wife, that's different. Shows permanence, investment. So you need a guard dog that can wear a dress. Another ghost smile. Something like that. Question is, what do you need? Caroline considered lying, spinning some story about wanting adventure or loving the frontier, but something in his gray eyes demanded truth. I need to disappear, she said simply. There are people back east who think I should be dead. Law? No, private interests, old scores from after the war. She pushed her own bowl away. I was part of a group that protected wagon trains heading west. Sometimes that protection got violent. Sometimes the wrong people died. And these wrong people had friends. Family, actually, with money and reach. She met his gaze steadily. If you take me on, mister Calloway, you might be inviting trouble. Might be? He actually smiled then, a real one that transformed his worn face. Miss Mercer, I'm trying to marry a woman who advertises that she can shoot straight and who just admitted to killing people. I'd say trouble is guaranteed. Then why? He leaned back, considering. Because I've read your letters. 5 of them now, each one honest as a slap. You don't prettify things, don't try to be something you're not. And because, he hesitated, then continued, because you understand that sometimes the war doesn't end just because they sign papers. Sometimes it follows you home. The truth of that sat between them, heavy as stone. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the dusty street orange and red. The saloon was getting louder, piano music and laughter drifting through the thin walls. I should tell you about the ranch, Ethan said, seemingly eager to move to safer ground. It's 40 miles north, up in the valley they call Devil's Bowl. 600 acres, mostly grassland, good water from the mountain runoff. I run cattle, about 200 head right now, though I'm building toward more. The house isn't much, 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it's solid. Built it myself from local timber. Neighbors? Nearest is Tom Morrison, 8 miles east. Good man, has a Blackfoot wife and 3 kids. Town is a day's ride. In winter, sometimes we're cut off for weeks when the passes snow in. Supplies? I go to town once a month, weather permitting, have a root cellar, smokehouse. I hunt, deer, elk, sometimes bear. You'd need to learn to preserve meat if you don't already know. I know. She'd learned that winter in Kansas when the wagon train got stuck in early snow. What about the railroad trouble? His face darkened. Northern Pacific. They want to run a spur line through the valley, claim it's the only viable route to the copper mines they're planning. They've made offers to buy, each one less generous than the last. Last month, they sent different kinds of messengers. How different? The kind that set fire to my barn. His hand tightened on his coffee cup. I rebuilt, but they'll be back. Winter might slow them down, but come spring, you need someone who can fight. I need someone who won't run when the fighting starts, he corrected. Most women would. Hell, most men would. But you... He studied her again. You're not most women. No, Caroline agreed. I'm not. They sat in silence as the waitress cleared their plates. The elderly couple left, nodding politely. The salesman folded his paper and headed upstairs. Soon it was just them and the waitress, who busied herself wiping already clean tables. "I should be clear about expectations," Ethan said finally. "This would be a legal marriage, but I'm not expecting, that is, you'd have your own space. I'm not looking for that kind of wife." Caroline felt something ease in her chest. "Good. I'm not looking to be that kind of wife. We'd be partners. Work partners. You help with the ranch. I provide shelter and protection from whoever's looking for you. We present a united front to the railroad. Share the work, share the resources. And if your trouble or mine catches up, we face it together." He extended his hand across the table. "What do you say, Miss Mercer? Want to disappoint everyone who expects you to be a proper frontier wife?" Caroline looked at his hand, scarred, calloused, steady despite that slight tremor. A hand that had held scalpels and saws, that had built a house from nothing, that had rebuilt after fire. She shook it, her grip firm as any man's. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow, if you're willing. Justice of the peace opens at 9. We could be at the ranch by nightfall. That eager to get back? I left Tom watching my cattle, but he has his own place to manage. And—" he stood, placing his hat back on. "And maybe I'm afraid if we wait, you'll realize what a bad bargain this is and leave on that morning stage." Caroline stood too, and for a moment they were close enough that she could smell the soap he'd used, see the fine lines around his eyes. "Mr. Calloway, I haven't run from anything since I was 12 years old. I'm not starting now." He touched the brim of his hat. "Then I'll see you at 9, Miss Mercer. Bring everything you own. The ranch is no place to leave things behind." After he left, Caroline climbed back to her room. She sat on the narrow bed, still fully dressed, and tried to imagine tomorrow. A wedding to a stranger. A ranch in a valley called Devil's Bowl. A partnership born of mutual need rather than affection. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. She pulled out her knife, testing the edge with her thumb. Sharp enough to cut silk, her father used to say. She'd kept it that way for 20 years, through everything. Tomorrow she'd strap it to her thigh under her wedding dress. The brown wool would have to do. And marry a man who understood that some wars never ended. The moon rose full and bright, casting shadows across the floor. Downstairs, the saloon had gone quiet. Just the occasional burst of laughter or clink of bottles. Normal sounds of a normal town where normal people lived normal lives. Caroline had never been normal. Now maybe she'd found someone else who wasn't either. She rose and went to the window, looking out at the sleeping town. Somewhere to the north, 40 miles through country that would soon be locked in winter, sat a ranch that needed defending. A man who needed a partner. A life that wouldn't require her to pretend to be soft or gentle or any of the things that had been burned out of her by war and survival. Movement caught her eye. A man stepping out of the saloon's shadow, looking up at her window. For a moment her hand went to her knife, then relaxed. It was Ethan, checking, making sure she was still there. She raised her hand, a small acknowledgement. He touched his hat brim and melted back into the darkness. Tomorrow she would marry him. Tomorrow she would become Caroline Calloway, ranch wife, frontierswoman. The fourth mail-order bride to arrive in Bitterhorn Ridge this month, but the only one who wouldn't apologize for the steel in her spine or the shadows in her eyes. Let the railroad come. Let the ghosts from back east follow. She'd faced worse and survived. The war had taught her how to fight. Maybe this strange, scarred man could teach her how to stop fighting long enough to build something worth defending. Dawn came pale and cold, frost etching patterns on the window. Caroline washed, dressed, packed her few belongings. The knife went on her thigh, hidden but accessible, an old habit that would die hard, if ever. She found Ethan waiting in the hotel lobby, dressed in what was probably his best shirt, his hair freshly cut. He looked nervous, younger somehow in the morning light. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "Third and fourth, actually," he admitted. "You?" "Fifth and sixth. But you're still here. So are you." He offered his arm formally, like they were about to enter a ballroom instead of walking to a justice of the peace. She took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the worn fabric, the slight tension that never quite left him. The justice of the peace was a round man named Harwick, who smelled of whiskey despite the early hour. His office was above the general store, reached by an outside staircase that creaked ominously under their weight. The witnesses were his wife, a pinched-faced woman who looked Caroline up and down with obvious disapproval, and the store clerk who kept sneaking glances at Caroline like she might suddenly sprout horns. "You have the license?" Harwick asked, already bored. Ethan produced it, along with the $2 fee. Harwick scanned it, shrugged, and opened his book. "Do you, Ethan James Calloway, take this woman to be your lawful wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Caroline Rose Mercer, take this man to be your lawful wedded husband?" Caroline hesitated for just a heartbeat, feeling the weight of the moment. Then, "I do." "Any rings?" "No," Ethan said. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride, though given the look of her, I'd ask permission first." Ethan turned to Caroline, a question in his eyes. She gave the smallest nod. He leaned in, his lips barely brushing hers, a kiss so light it might have been imagination. But his hand, where it briefly touched her cheek, was warm and real. "Congratulations," Harwick said dryly. "Try not to kill each other." Outside, Caroline blinked in the sudden brightness. Married. In the span of 10 minutes, she'd gone from spinster to wife. The absurdity of it should have been funny, but all she felt was a strange relief. The decision was made. No more wondering, no more backing out. "The wagon's at the livery," Ethan said. "We should go before the weather turns." They retrieved her carpetbag from the hotel, ignoring the clerk's knowing smirk. The wagon was sturdy but plain, pulled by 2 solid draft horses. Ethan helped her up, unnecessary but appreciated, then climbed up beside her. "Last chance," he said, taking the reins. "Drive, Mr. Calloway." "Ethan," he corrected. "We're married now." "Then drive, Ethan." He clicked to the horses, and they rolled out of Bitterhorn Ridge, leaving behind the whispers and stares and normalcy that neither of them had ever quite fit into anyway. The road north wound through grassland that stretched to the horizon, broken by stands of cottonwood and pine. The mountains grew closer, their peaks sharp against the October sky. They didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable, the kind that didn't need filling. At midday, they stopped by a stream to water the horses and eat the lunch Ethan had packed: cold biscuits, dried beef, apples from someone's orchard. "Tell me about the house," Caroline said, needing something concrete to anchor this strange new reality. "It's not fancy," Ethan warned. "Main room with the fireplace, bedroom off to the side, kitchen lean-to on the back. Outhouse is 20 yards from the back door, far enough for propriety, close enough for winter nights. There's a barn, new since the fire, and a chicken coop, though the chickens got taken by a fox last month. We'll need more chickens. There's a woman in town, Mrs. Chen, sells good layers. We can go next supply run." "We." The word sat between them, foreign but not unpleasant. "What about the bedroom situation?" Caroline asked, direct as always. "I'll take the main room. There's a cot I can set up by the fire. The bedroom is yours." "That hardly seems fair." "It's what's proper," he interrupted, then laughed at himself. "As if any of this is proper. A mail-order marriage to a woman who carries a knife in her boot. How did you—" "The way you walk. Careful on the left side. Knife or derringer, I figured." "Knife. A derringer's too loud." "Practical." They climbed back into the wagon as clouds began gathering over the mountains. The road grew rougher, winding through stands of pine that filled the air with resin scent. Once they passed another wagon heading south, the driver tipping his hat while his wife stared openly at Caroline. "You'll be a curiosity," Ethan warned. "Not many women in the valley, and none like you." "I've been a curiosity before." "I imagine you have." The sun was setting when they crested the final ridge. Below them, Devil's Bowl Valley spread out in the fading light, a perfect cup of grassland surrounded by mountains, a silver thread of river winding through its heart. And there, small but solid against the vastness, sat a log house with smoke rising from its chimney. "Home," Ethan said, and the word carried more question than statement. Caroline studied the valley, cataloging defensible positions, water access, sight lines. Then she looked at the house, rough built but sturdy, with real glass windows and a covered porch. Someone had planted flowers once. Their dried stalks still stood in neat rows. "Your first wife?" she asked. "No, me. I thought." He shrugged. "I thought they might make it more welcoming. Foolish." "Not foolish. Hopeful." "Same thing, sometimes." They descended into the valley as true dark fell, the horses knowing the way. The house grew larger, more real. Caroline could see the new barn, raw lumber still bright against the older weathered wood of the house. Could see the fence lines, the garden plot, the markers of a life being built from scratch. Ethan pulled up in front of the house, set the brake, and climbed down. He offered his hand to help her, and this time she took it, stepping down into her new life. "I'll see to the horses," he said. "You go on in, get the measure of things. Fire should still be going. I banked it this morning." Caroline took her carpet bag and climbed the porch steps. The door wasn't locked, probably wasn't even a lock. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The main room was larger than she'd expected, dominated by a stone fireplace that Ethan had indeed banked well. Coals glowed red beneath white ash. The furniture was handmade but solid. A table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, shelves holding dishes and supplies. Everything clean, ordered, but with the sterile feeling of a place where no one really lived, just existed. The bedroom was through a door to the right, a rope bed with a straw mattress, a trunk, hooks on the wall for clothes. The narrow window looked out toward the mountains. Her room now. Her bed, though she'd slept in far worse places. She set her bag on the trunk and returned to the main room just as Ethan came in, carrying a load of firewood. "It's not much," he said, suddenly seeming uncertain. "It's enough," Caroline replied, and meant it. "Show me the ranch tomorrow?" "First light, if you're up for it. Need to check the cattle, make sure Tom didn't let them scatter to hell and gone." "I'll be ready." They stood there awkwardly, 2 strangers who were suddenly married, suddenly sharing a roof. "I'll bring the cot from the barn," Ethan said finally. "I can help." "No, it's... let me." He paused at the door. "Caroline, whatever else this is or isn't, I want you to know you're safe here. From me, I mean. I know some men might expect, but I'm not that kind." "I know," she said quietly. "You wouldn't have lasted this long alone if you were." He nodded and went out into the dark. Caroline moved to the fire, adding a log, watching the flames catch and rise. Outside, wind was picking up, rattling the windows. Winter coming, just as Ethan had said. When he returned with the cot, she helped him set it up despite his protests. They worked in comfortable silence, 2 people used to doing for themselves now learning to do alongside another. Later, after a simple supper of beans and cornbread, they sat by the fire. Him in the rocking chair, her in the straight-back chair she'd pulled close to the warmth. "How long before they come?" she asked, not needing to specify who. "The railroad? Soon as the weather breaks in spring, I expect. They'll want to start construction before next winter. And my troubles, they might come sooner. Then we'll be ready." He stared into the fire. "I didn't rebuild that barn just to see it burn again." Caroline pulled out her knife, began cleaning it with an oiled cloth from her bag. The familiar ritual settled her nerves, gave her hands something to do. "That's a good blade," Ethan observed. "My father's. Only thing of his that came home from Antietam." "He teach you to use it?" "No." "I taught myself. Had to." They sat in companionable silence, the fire crackling, wind singing through the gaps in the chinking. This strange wedding night, with bride and groom on opposite sides of the room, each nursing their own wounds and weapons. "Caroline," Ethan said suddenly, "I know this isn't what either of us planned for our lives. But maybe that's all right. Maybe 2 people who've been broken by the same things can build something whole." She looked at him across the firelit room, this scarred stranger who was now her husband. "Maybe," she agreed. "Or maybe we'll just be broken together. That's something too." "Yes," she said, sliding the knife back into its sheath. "That's something too." The fire burned lower. Eventually, Ethan banked it for the night, and Caroline retreated to the bedroom that smelled of cedar and loneliness. She lay fully dressed on top of the covers, knife within reach, listening to Ethan settle onto the cot in the other room. Her first night as a married woman. Her first night in Devil's Bowl Valley. Her first night of this strange new life she'd chosen, or that had chosen her. Outside, something howled, wolf or wind, she couldn't tell. But the walls were solid, the fire still gave warmth, and in the other room was a man who understood that sometimes the best partnership was between two people who knew how to stand watch. Caroline closed her eyes, not quite sleeping, but resting, waiting for whatever dawn would bring to this valley that might become home. The crack of rifle fire jerked Caroline from sleep before dawn. She rolled from the bed, knife already in hand, her body responding with the muscle memory of 100 other violent awakenings. Through the thin walls, she heard Ethan's cot creak, his footsteps quick but controlled as he moved to the window. "Stay down!" he called, but Caroline was already at her own window, peering through the frost-glazed glass into the pre-dawn darkness. The shot had come from the north, toward the cattle pastures. A second shot followed, then silence. She dressed quickly in the dark, pulling on her boots and the heavy coat Ethan had left hanging by the door yesterday. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found him loading a Winchester, his movements precise despite the tremor in his left hand. "Could be wolves," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Or rustlers. Either way, we go together." Caroline checked her knife, then picked up the second rifle leaning by the door, testing its weight and balance. "You don't know me well enough yet, but I don't stay behind while others fight." He studied her for a moment in the dim light from the banked fire, then nodded. "Can you ride?" "Better than most men. There's a mare in the barn, black with a white blaze. She's fast and steady. Saddle's on the third peg." He was already moving toward the door. "I'll take the gelding." The cold hit like a physical blow when they stepped outside. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees overnight, and the stars were brilliant chips of ice in the black sky. Their breath clouded white as they ran to the barn, the frozen ground crackling under their boots. The horses were restless, ears pricked toward the north. Caroline found the mare, a beautiful animal with intelligent eyes, and had her saddled before Ethan finished with his gelding. He noticed, a slight smile ghosting across his face. "You weren't exaggerating about the riding." "I don't exaggerate about skills that might keep me alive." They mounted and rode out, the horses' hooves muffled by the frost-thick grass. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the mountains purple-gray. As they crested the first rise, Caroline saw the cattle. About 50 head clustered nervously in the lower pasture, their breath steaming in the cold. "There." Ethan pointed to a dark shape near the fence line. They approached carefully, rifles ready. It was a calf, throat torn out, blood black in the dim light. Wolf tracks circled the carcass, but there were boot prints too. Human boot prints. "Wolves don't usually attack this close to the house," Ethan said quietly. "And they sure as hell don't wear boots." Caroline dismounted, studying the tracks. 2 men. One stayed here, probably fired those shots to bring us running. The other, she followed the prints to where they disappeared into a stand of pines. Went that way. Recent, maybe an hour old. Railroad men? Could be. Or could be my past catching up faster than expected. She remounted, scanning the tree line. Either way, they wanted us to know they were here. This is a message. Then let's send one back. They followed the tracks into the pines, moving carefully through the shadows. The trail led north, toward the pass that connected Devil's Bowl to the outside world. After a mile, they found where the men had tethered horses, the ground churned by hooves. "They're gone," Ethan said, but he didn't lower his rifle. For now. They sat their horses in silence, watching the lightening sky, both understanding that their strange marriage had just become something more urgent. The trouble they'd each warned about wasn't coming. It was here. "We should get back," Caroline said. "Check the rest of the stock, secure the property." "You mean set up defensive positions?" She looked at him sharply. "You were more than just a medic. Sometimes medics had to fight too. Especially at the end, when the lines broke down." He turned his horse. "Come on. I'll show you the whole property, every approach, every weakness. If we're going to be under siege, we might as well know our battlefield." They spent the morning riding the boundaries of Ethan's land. Their land now, Caroline supposed. He showed her the three water sources, the box canyon where he'd hidden cattle during the barn burning, the high ground that commanded views of all approaches. She memorized it all, her mind automatically cataloging fields of fire, fallback positions, choke points. "You're planning a war," Ethan observed as they paused at the highest point, looking down at the house that seemed impossibly small and vulnerable. "I'm planning to survive." "There's a difference." "Not much of one, sometimes." They returned to find Tom Morrison waiting on the porch, his rifle across his knees. He was a weathered man in his 50s, with the kind of still watchfulness that came from living between two worlds, White and Blackfoot, civilization and frontier. "Heard shots," he said simply. "Figured you might need help." "Wolf kill," Ethan said, dismounting, "with boot prints for seasoning." Tom's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his dark eyes. "Railroad's getting bold." Or stupid, hard to tell which is worse. "Tom, this is Caroline, my wife." Tom stood slowly, taking in Caroline's height, her stance, the way her hand rested naturally near her knife. "Ma'am, Mary's been curious about you since she heard Ethan went to town for a bride." "Not much to be curious about," Caroline said. "I doubt that." Tom's smile was slight but genuine. "Woman who can sit a horse like that, handle a rifle like she was born to it? Plenty to be curious about." "Tom's wife Mary is a healer," Ethan explained. "Knows more about medicinal plants than any doctor I've met. You two should meet." "Bring her by," Tom said to Caroline. "Mary doesn't get enough female company, and the women in town—" He shrugged. "They're not exactly welcoming to Indians or anyone who associates with them." "I'm not exactly welcome in town myself," Caroline said, "so that works out fine." Tom left after sharing coffee and information. Strangers had been seen in the area for the past week, asking questions about Ethan's land, about water rights, about who might be convinced to sell. The railroad was definitely moving, gathering intelligence before making their next play. After he left, Caroline and Ethan worked in companionable silence, each falling into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped him move the cattle closer to the house, learned the personality of each horse in his small remuda, discovered that the chickens he'd claimed were taken by a fox were actually hiding in the loft, having gone feral. "Seems even your chickens have trust issues," she said, watching him try to coax them down with grain. "Can't say I blame them. Everything out here wants to eat them, including us." That evening, as she prepared their supper, venison from Ethan's smokehouse, potatoes from his root cellar, Caroline found herself relaxing into the strange domesticity of it. She'd never been much of a cook, but she knew the basics, and Ethan didn't seem to expect anything fancy. "This is good," he said, and seemed genuinely surprised. "The last woman who cooked for me was my mother, and she believed everything needed to be boiled until it surrendered." "You never married before?" "Really?" Caroline found that hard to believe. Despite his scars, Ethan was a handsome man, and he had land, cattle, prospects. "Almost. Once." He pushed his potato around his plate. "Rebecca, back in Ohio. We were engaged before I enlisted. When I came back from Andersonville, I was—" He paused, searching for words. "Different. Too different. She tried, but every time she looked at me, she saw what I used to be, not what I'd become. Finally, I left to save us both the misery." "Her loss." "Kind of you to say, but not true. She married a shopkeeper, has 4 kids now. She got the life she wanted, just not with me." He looked up at her. "What about you? Ever come close?" "No. Never wanted to until—" She stopped, surprised by what she'd almost said. "Until?" "Until it became necessary. Marriage as camouflage, I mean." "Right, camouflage." But something in his gray eyes suggested he'd heard what she hadn't said. That night, they sat by the fire again, but closer this time. The chairs pulled into a more intimate circle. Ethan was cleaning his rifle while Caroline worked on patching a tear in her coat. Domestic scenes that weren't quite domestic, performed by 2 people playing at being married while something real and unnamed grew in the space between them. "Tell me about the people looking for you," Ethan said suddenly. "If they're coming, I need to know what to expect." Caroline set down her sewing. "His name is Royce Dalton. Colonel Royce Dalton, though his commission was more about money than military service. His younger brother was part of a group that attacked our wagon train in '72. We were in Kansas, heading for Colorado. They wanted the women. She stared into the fire. We didn't let them take the women. And the brother? Dead, along with 6 of his men. I killed 3 of them myself. She said it matter-of-factly, without pride or shame. Dalton's been hunting me ever since. He's rich, connected, patient. I've been running for 6 years, changing names, never staying anywhere long enough to make friends. Until now. Why now? Why stop running? Caroline picked up her sewing again, taking careful, precise stitches. I'm tired. And maybe I'm tired of being alone with it. The running, the watching, the waiting. At least here, if they come, I'll see them coming. And I won't be alone. No, Ethan agreed quietly. You won't be alone. A week passed, then 2. They fell into routines that felt both new and ancient. Caroline learned the rhythms of ranch life, dawn feedings, fence repairs, the constant vigilance against predators, both animal and human. Ethan taught her to read the weather in the clouds over the mountains, to doctor sick cattle, to tell the difference between a horse's annoyed nicker and its warning call. She taught him things too, though neither of them named it as teaching. How to move through the house without sound, how to position mirrors to eliminate blind spots, how to cache weapons and supplies in hidden locations around the property. He absorbed it all without question, understanding that these were lessons written in blood and survival. 3 weeks into their marriage, the first snow came. Not the gentle dusting Caroline had expected, but a brutal storm that howled down from the mountains, dropping 2 feet overnight. She woke to a world transformed, white and silent except for the wind's constant moan. Welcome to winter in Devil's Bowl, Ethan said, handing her coffee as she stared out at the buried landscape. This is just the beginning. By January, the drifts will be 8 feet deep in places. How do the cattle survive? We moved them to the sheltered valleys, put out hay. Lost 12 head last winter, but that's better than most. Tom lost 20. They spent the day digging paths to the barn and outbuildings, checking on animals, preparing for the long siege winter represented. Working beside him, Caroline felt something she hadn't experienced in years: partnership. Not the desperate alliance of survival she'd known with the wagon train guards, but something steadier, built on shared labor and growing trust. That night, the storm worsening, they were trapped in the warm circle of the house. Ethan had brought out a battered chess set, and they played by firelight, the wind screaming around the corners of the house. You're good, he said, after she'd beaten him twice. My father taught me. Said it was like war. Sacrifice the pawns, protect the king, think 5 moves ahead. Cynical man. Realistic. He was right about the war, just didn't live to see how right. Ethan moved his knight, a defensive play. Do you miss him? Every day. He was steady, solid, the kind of man who could build something from nothing and make it last. She moved her bishop, setting up a trap 3 moves out. I think he would have liked you. You didn't know me a week ago. No, but I know you now. Or enough of you. She watched him study the board, seeing the trap too late. You build things. You endure. You don't quit. He would have respected that. Check, she added, moving her queen. Damn. But he was smiling. Rebecca never played chess. Said it was too violent. It is violent. That's the point. War without blood. Is that what we're doing? Playing war? Caroline considered the board, the storm, the man across from her who was technically her husband but still essentially a stranger. Except he wasn't. Not really. In 3 weeks she'd learned his silences, his tells, the way his left hand trembled more when rain was coming. She knew he had nightmares too, though he was quieter about them than she was. No, she said finally. I think we're learning to be on the same side. He met her eyes across the chessboard, and something passed between them. Not passion, not yet, but possibility. The recognition of like calling to like, of damaged people finding their match in unexpected places. The storm lasted 3 days. By the end of it, they'd rearranged the furniture to be more defensive, cached weapons in strategic locations, and started teaching each other their individual combat skills. Ethan showed her field medicine, how to stop bleeding, set bones, dig out bullets. Caroline taught him knife work, silent movement, how to use an opponent's weight against them. "You fight dirty," he observed, picking himself up from the floor after she'd demonstrated a throw. "I fight to win. There's a difference, not much of one. You keep saying that about things. Maybe because out here, the distinctions matter less than philosophers think." On the fourth day, the sun came out, turning the world into blinding crystal. They dug out again, checked the cattle, 3 dead from the cold, but the rest survived, and found Tom Morrison on snowshoes at their door by afternoon. "Wanted to check on you folks," he said, though his expression suggested there was more. "We're fine," Ethan said. "Lost 3 head, but could have been worse." "It will be." Railroad men were in town during the storm, staying at the hotel, asking questions. They were particularly interested in you, Mrs. Calloway. Caroline felt Ethan tense beside her. "What kind of questions?" "Where you came from? Who you were before? Why a woman like you would marry a rancher with problem land?" Tom accepted the coffee Caroline offered. Mrs. Chen at the general store told them to mind their own business, but others were more talkative. "Let them talk," Caroline said. "I've got nothing to hide." "Don't you?" Tom's look was knowing. "Mary says you move like someone who's been hunted. Says you've got the look of a woman who's killed and will kill again if needed." "Mary sees a lot for someone I haven't met." "She was watching from the ridge when you and Ethan tracked those boot prints. Said you tracked like a Blackfoot warrior, not a white woman." "That a compliment?" "From Mary." "The highest." Tom stood. "They're planning something. Don't know what, but it won't be straightforward. The Northern Pacific doesn't like to lose, and that's what Ethan's resistance looks like to them." After Tom left, Ethan and Caroline stood on the porch, looking out at their snow-buried valley. "We could leave," Ethan said quietly. "Pack what we can, head further west, Oregon, maybe California." "You want to run?" "No, but I want you to have the option. This isn't your fight, not really." Caroline turned to face him fully. "Ethan Calloway, I married you, for better or worse, remember? Your fights are my fights now." "That's not why I married you, son." "No, you married me because you needed someone who wouldn't run when trouble came. Well, trouble's here, and I'm not running. Besides," she added with a slight smile, "my trouble will probably show up soon too. Might as well face it all at once. Practical. Surviving usually is." That night, for the first time, they didn't immediately retreat to their separate sleeping arrangements after supper. Instead, they sat together on the single bench Ethan had built, pulled close to the fire. Caroline had found a book on his sparse shelf, poetry, surprisingly, Byron and Shelley, and read aloud while he mended harness leather. "You like poetry?" she asked, surprised by the annotations in his careful hand. "Helped in the prison camp. Give men something beautiful to think about while they were dying. I memorized as much as I could, recited it when the books fell apart." He was quiet for a moment. "Still helps on the bad nights." Caroline read She Walks in Beauty, her voice soft in the firelit room. When she finished, she found Ethan watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" "Nothing. Just, that's the first time I've heard that poem in a voice that suited it." Something warm bloomed in Caroline's chest, unexpected, and not entirely unwelcome. "Ethan, I know, we agreed, partnership, not that." "Right." But she didn't move away when he shifted slightly closer on the bench, and he didn't pull back when their shoulders touched. A week later, the second message came. Caroline was in the barn, mucking stalls, a chore she actually enjoyed for its simplicity, when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. She grabbed the rifle she'd learned to keep always within reach and moved to the barn door. 4 riders were coming down the valley road, dark shapes against the snow. Ethan emerged from the house, his own rifle ready. They waited, tense, as the riders approached. But it wasn't railroad men. It was Tom Morrison, his 2 eldest sons, and a man Caroline didn't recognize. Tall, weathered, with the kind of careful movement that spoke of recent injury. "Found him on the North Road," Tom said without preamble. "Horse was dead. He was half frozen. Says he's looking for Caroline Mercer." The stranger looked up, and Caroline's blood went cold. She knew that face, though it was gaunter than she remembered, marked by frostbite and exhaustion. "Marcus?" she breathed. Marcus Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen in town, despite the name, had been part of her wagon train guard unit. The last time she'd seen him, he was bleeding out in her arms after the Dalton attack, telling her to run, to save herself. "Hello, Caroline," he said, and then collapsed. They carried him inside, Ethan immediately shifting into medic mode. He ordered hot water, blankets, checked for frostbite, and assessed injuries with quick professional movements. Caroline helped, her hands steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "3 broken ribs," Ethan announced. "Knife wound in the shoulder, infected but not septic yet. Frostbite on the fingers and toes, but not severe. He'll live, with care." It took 2 hours to get Marcus warm and stable. Tom and his sons left with promises to check back tomorrow and warnings to be careful. Finally, Marcus was conscious enough to talk, propped up in the bed Caroline had vacated for him. "How?" was all Caroline could manage. "I didn't die," Marcus said with a ghost of his old smile. "Close thing, but a Mexican family found me, nursed me back. Took 2 years to fully heal, another 4 to track you down." "Why track me down?" His expression darkened. "Because Dalton's coming. He knows where you are. I've been following his men trying to get here first to warn you." "How many men?" 8, maybe 10. Professional guns, not railroad thugs. They'll be here within the week, maybe sooner if this weather clears." Caroline felt Ethan's hand on her shoulder, solid and reassuring. "Then we'll be ready." Marcus looked between them, taking in the small intimacy of that touch. "You're married? Really married?" "Legally," Caroline said. "It's complicated. Everything with you always was." Marcus tried to sit up straighter, winced. "I'm sorry I brought this to your door. I tried to lead them away, but Dalton's too smart. He knows you're here." "You didn't bring anything," Caroline said firmly. "Dalton would have found me eventually. At least now we have warning." Ethan spoke up. "You're welcome here as long as you need. Any friend of Caroline's has our protection. Even one that brings an army to your door? Especially then. Man needs all the friends he can get when armies are involved." That night, with Marcus sleeping fitfully in the bedroom, Caroline and Ethan sat by the fire, planning. The easy domesticity of the past weeks was gone, replaced by the sharp awareness of coming violence. "We could ford up here," Ethan said, sketching rough diagrams on brown paper. "The house is solid, good sight lines. But if they bring fire, they will. It's Dalton's way." Caroline studied the sketches. "We need to control where the fight happens, choose our ground. The Box Canyon. Only one way in, steep walls, if we could lure them there. It could work. But we'd need more guns. 2 rifles and a wounded man won't hold off 10 professionals. Tom would help. His sons, too. They're good shots, and they hate the railroad as much as anyone. This isn't their fight. Out here, everyone's fight is everyone's fight. That's how we survive. They planned until the fire burned low, mapping out defensive positions, fallback routes, supply caches. It was like the old days for Caroline, preparing for an attack on the wagon train, except this time she wasn't protecting strangers. She was protecting what? Her home? The word felt foreign but not wrong. "You should sleep," Ethan said finally. "I'll take first watch." "Where?" "Marcus has the bedroom." "You can..." He hesitated, then gestured to his cot. "It's comfortable enough." The cot smelled like him, leather and wood smoke and something indefinably male. Caroline lay down fully clothed, her knife in reach, but for once, sleep didn't come easy. Through the thin walls, she could hear Marcus's labored breathing, the whisper of Ethan turning pages in his poetry book, the settling of the fire. This strange life she'd built in just a month, was it worth defending? Worth killing for? Worth possibly dying for? She thought about Ethan's steady presence, the way he'd accepted her without trying to change or tame her. Thought about the cattle they'd saved in the storm, the chess games by firelight, the slowly growing warmth between them that neither quite acknowledged. Yes, she decided, it was worth defending, all of it. Caroline? Ethan's voice was soft in the darkness. You awake? Yes. I want you to know, if this goes bad, if Dalton is too much, I'm glad you're here. Glad I married you, even if it was supposed to be just convenience. It's not convenient anymore, is it? No, it's not. She heard him shift in his chair, probably checking the windows again. Ethan? I'm glad too, whatever happens. The next morning brought clear skies and Marcus strong enough to sit up and clean his guns. He'd managed to keep 2 Colt revolvers and a rifle, though his ammunition was limited. Caroline had avoided being alone with him, but when Ethan went to check the cattle, she couldn't postpone the conversation any longer. You look good, Marcus said, which was probably a lie but kindly meant. Harder, but settled, like you found something worth standing still for. Maybe I have. This Ethan, he seems like a good man. He is. Does he know? About everything? Enough. He knows about the Dalton gang, about the killing. He doesn't need the details. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I loved you, you know, back then. Would have married you if you'd let me. I know. But we were different people then. The war, the fighting, it ate us up. What we had, it was born from violence. That's no foundation for a life. And this is? Caroline thought about it. This is 2 broken people trying to build something from the pieces. It's not love, not like in the stories, but it's real, solid. You sure it's not love? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Because watching Ethan work, seeing his careful hands and steady presence, feeling the warmth of him beside her in the evening, what was that if not a kind of love? Different from the passionate fire she'd felt with Marcus in their youth, but perhaps more lasting. Dalton won't stop, Marcus said, changing the subject. Not until you're dead or he is. He's obsessed. You killed his baby brother, and in his mind that's unforgivable. His baby brother was a rapist and murderer. Doesn't matter to Dalton. Family is family. Then he'll have to die. I won't spend my life running anymore. Killing him won't be easy. He's smart, careful, and he has resources we don't. He's never faced me when I wasn't running. Never faced me when I had something to protect. Caroline checked her knife, a habitual gesture. That changes things. Ethan returned with Tom Morrison and his sons, James and Robert, both in their 20s, both with their mother's steady gaze and their father's quiet competence. They gathered around the table, a war council, in a frontier kitchen. My family owes you, Tom said to Ethan. When the railroad tried to force us off our land 2 years ago, you stood with us. Now we stand with you. This isn't about the railroad, Ethan warned. This is about Caroline's past. Doesn't matter. You're neighbors. In this valley, that means something. They spent the day preparing. The women, Mary Morrison had come too, bringing medical supplies and her own rifle, cooked food that would keep, prepared bandages, loaded ammunition. The men dug defensive positions, set up kill zones, prepared the Box Canyon trap. Your wife, Mary said to Caroline as they worked side by side, she moves like a warrior. That seems to bother most people. Not me. The world needs more warrior women. Too many sheep, not enough wolves. Most people prefer sheep. Most people are fools. Mary smiled, and Caroline understood why Tom had risked everything to marry her. Ethan is not a fool. No, he's not. He watches you when you're not looking, like a man seeing sun after years of darkness. Caroline didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. But she felt warmth spread through her chest, hope maybe, or something stronger. That night, their last before Dalton was expected, the house was crowded with their small army. The Morrison men would sleep in the barn, taking shifts on watch. Mary would stay in the house, ready to treat wounded. Marcus, stronger now, insisted on taking a watch despite Ethan's medical protests. Caroline found herself on the porch with Ethan, looking out at their valley under stars. Scared? He asked. No. Maybe I should be, but no. This feels right, making a stand. Fighting for something instead of just fighting. I meant what I said last night about being glad. I know. He turned to her, and in the starlight she could see his face clearly, the scars, the lines, the eyes that had seen too much but still held kindness. Caroline, if we survive this, when? When we survive this. When we survive this, maybe we could try being really married. Not just partners, but more. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth in the cold night air. Ethan Calloway, are you courting me? Maybe. Is it working? Instead of answering, she kissed him. Not the brief brush of lips from their wedding, but something real and warm and full of promise. He made a soft sound of surprise. Then his arms came around her, pulling her closer. For a moment, the coming battle didn't matter. The past didn't matter. There was just this. Two people finding each other in the darkness. When they pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. That's a yes, then? That's a we'll see, but it's a good start. A shout from the barn broke the moment. James Morrison had spotted riders on the ridge, watching the house. They were here. Caroline checked her weapons one more time, then looked at Ethan. Ready? With you. Always. Tomorrow would bring blood and violence, the settling of old scores and the defense of new dreams. But tonight, surrounded by people willing to fight beside them, Caroline felt something she hadn't experienced since before her father marched off to war. She felt like she was home. The war was coming to Devil's Bowl Valley, but this time Caroline wouldn't face it alone. The riders on the ridge stayed there all night, just watching, their campfire a pinprick of light against the darkness. Caroline didn't sleep. She sat by the window with her rifle, studying their position, trying to think like Dalton. He was too smart to attack directly, not when he could see they were prepared. No, he'd try something else first. Psychological warfare, maybe. Dalton had always understood that breaking someone's spirit was more effective than breaking their body. Dawn came gray and bitter cold, the temperature dropping even further overnight. Ice crystals hung in the air, and every breath burned. Through the frost-covered window, Caroline counted the riders as they broke camp. 8 men, all armed, moving with the easy confidence of professionals. But no Dalton. Not yet. He's not with them, Marcus said from behind her. He moved stiffly, his ribs still tender, but the fever had broken and his hands were steady on his guns. That's not his style. He sends the dogs first, see how sharp your teeth are. Then we show them, Caroline said. She turned to find the entire household awake and armed. Tom Morrison and his sons had come in from the barn, frost in their beards, rifles ready. Mary was at the stove, calmly making coffee, as if armed sieges were a daily occurrence. Ethan stood by the door, watching her with those gray eyes that missed nothing. "They're coming down," Robert Morrison called from his position at the north window. "Slow and spread out." Caroline moved to look. The 8 riders were descending into the valley in a wide line, too far apart for concentrated fire, but close enough to support each other. Professional formation. These weren't typical hired guns. "Ex-military," Ethan observed. "Cavalry, from the look of it." "Dalton always did like his soldiers," Marcus said bitterly. "Easier to command men who are used to following orders." The riders stopped just outside rifle range, dismounting with practiced efficiency. One man, tall and lean, with a gray beard, stepped forward with a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. "Parley," Tom Morrison spat, "like this is some kind of civilized war." "Let me," Caroline said, but Ethan was already shaking his head. Together or not at all. They stepped onto the porch, Ethan and Caroline, while the others covered them from windows. The cold hit like a physical blow, but Caroline barely felt it. Her focus was entirely on the man walking toward them, his boots crunching through the frozen snow. He stopped 20 yards away, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough to dive for cover if shooting started. Definitely ex-military. "Mrs. Dalton wants to speak with Miss Mercer," the man called. His accent was Eastern, educated, alone and unarmed. Caroline felt Ethan tense beside her. "There is no Miss Mercer here," she called back. "Only Mrs. Calloway." The man smiled thinly. "Names change. The past doesn't. Mrs. Dalton is waiting at the tree line. 1 hour. Come alone, or we'll burn everything you've built here." "And if she doesn't come," Ethan demanded, Then we do it anyway, just slower. The man's eyes were cold as winter stone. Colonel Dalton wants his satisfaction one way or another. But Mrs. Dalton insisted on trying the civilized approach first. She's sentimental that way. Mrs. Dalton. Caroline had never known Royce had married. That changed things, added complications she hadn't anticipated. 1 hour, the man repeated, then turned and walked back to his men, not hurrying, showing no fear of being shot in the back. The confidence of a man who'd done this before. Back inside, the debate was fierce and immediate. It's a trap, Marcus said flatly. Dalton doesn't negotiate. He destroys. Could be reconnaissance, Tom suggested. Get you away from the house. See our numbers. Or it could be genuine, Mary said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. A woman might see this differently than a man. Might want to end it without bloodshed. Caroline stood silent, thinking. The smart move was to refuse, to ford up and make them come. But something nagged at her. Why send a wife? Why offer parley at all? Dalton had superior numbers, time on his side. Unless... He's hurt, she said suddenly. Dalton's hurt or sick. That's why he's not here, why they're trying negotiation. Something's wrong. All the more reason not to go, Ethan said. Wounded animals are the most dangerous. And the most vulnerable. Caroline had already made up her mind. I'm going. Like hell you are, Ethan said, the first time she'd heard him raise his voice. We decided together, remember? No one faces anything alone anymore. This isn't your past coming to call. No, but you're my wife. That makes it my present. He gripped her shoulders, his hands firm but gentle. Caroline, please. Don't do this. She reached up, covered his hands with hers. I have to know what we're really facing. Trust me, I've survived Royce Dalton before. Not when he had you outnumbered 8-1. 7, Marcus corrected. The woman won't fight. Not directly. Caroline pulled away from Ethan gently. I'm going. But not unarmed, whatever they think. She strapped her knife to her thigh, hidden under her skirt. An old derringer went into her boot. If I'm not back in 2 hours, or if you hear shooting, implement the canyon plan. Caroline? Ethan started, but she silenced him with a kiss, quick but fierce. Trust me, she whispered against his lips. She walked out alone, leaving her rifle behind as a show of good faith. The cold was brutal, the wind cutting through her coat like blades. The 8 men watched her pass, their faces expressionless, their hands near their weapons but not on them. Yet. At the tree line, a small tent had been erected, military style, efficient and temporary. A woman emerged as Caroline approached. She was perhaps 30, beautiful in the delicate way that suggested good breeding and careful tending. Her dress was expensive but practical, her coat lined with fur. But it was her eyes that caught Caroline's attention, intelligent, tired, and surprisingly sympathetic. Miss Mercer, or should I say Mrs. Calloway? The woman's voice was cultured, a Boston accent maybe. I'm Elizabeth Dalton. Thank you for coming. You have something to say? Say it. Elizabeth smiled sadly. Direct. Royce said you would be. She gestured to the tent. Please, it's warmer inside. The tent held a small camp stove, 2 chairs, and a cot where a figure lay covered in blankets. Caroline's hand went to her hidden knife, but Elizabeth shook her head. He can't hurt you. Not anymore. Caroline moved closer and her breath caught. Royce Dalton lay unconscious, his face gray and sunken, his breathing labored. The strong, vicious man who'd haunted her for 6 years was reduced to this, a dying shadow. Pneumonia, Elizabeth said quietly, started 2 weeks ago. The doctor in Billings said he wouldn't survive the journey, but he insisted. He had to find you, had to finish it. She sat in one of the chairs, suddenly looking exhausted. He's been dying for months, really. Cancer, the doctors think. This pneumonia is just the final insult. Caroline remained standing, ready to move if needed. Why tell me this? Because I want it to end. This obsession of his, this need for vengeance, it's consumed him, consumed our entire marriage. Elizabeth's laugh was bitter. I was 17 when we married. He was handsome, wealthy, charming. I didn't know about his brother, about you, about any of it until after the wedding. And when you found out, I tried to leave. He discouraged that, forcefully. Elizabeth touched her ribs absently, and Caroline recognized the gesture of old injuries. So I stayed, played the dutiful wife, watched him spend our fortune on finding you, on hiring these men, on this insane quest for revenge. He's dying. It ends anyway. Does it? Elizabeth looked up sharply. These men are paid through the spring. Even if Royce dies today, they have orders to complete the job. Unless? Unless you end it. Publicly, definitively. Elizabeth stood, pulled out a leather portfolio. I've had documents drawn up. A confession that you killed William Dalton in cold blood, unprovoked. A statement of regret. In exchange, I call off the men, we leave, and you never hear from the Dalton family again. Caroline almost laughed. You want me to confess to murder? To a killing 6 years ago in Kansas. The statute of limitations has passed, and Kansas has no interest in prosecuting frontier justice from that era. The confession would be purely for Royce, to let him die thinking his brother was avenged. His brother was a rapist. I know. Elizabeth's voice was quiet but firm. I investigated, after I learned the truth, found witnesses, testimonies. William Dalton was a monster, but Royce can't see that, won't see it. In his mind, his baby brother was an innocent killed by a vicious woman. Caroline studied the other woman, seeing the exhaustion, the fear, but also the determination. Elizabeth Dalton was trying to save something, though Caroline wasn't sure what. What happens to you when he dies? I inherit what's left of the estate. Not much after this manhunt, but enough to start over, maybe in California, somewhere warm where nobody knows the Dalton name. Elizabeth's smile was wistful. Somewhere I can be someone other than a monster's wife. From the cot, Royce stirred, mumbling incoherently. Elizabeth moved to his side, adjusting his blankets with practiced care. Even knowing what he was, she tended him gently. The complexity of it, the tragedy, made Caroline's chest tight. I need to think, Caroline said. You have until tomorrow dawn. After that, whether Royce is alive or dead, those men will follow their orders. Elizabeth returned to her chair. Mrs. Calloway, Caroline, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I swear on whatever honor I have left, if you sign those papers, this ends. No more running, no more looking over your shoulder. Freedom for both of us. Caroline left the tent, her mind churning. The walk back to the house felt longer, the weight of decision heavier than her weapons. The men watched her pass again, and this time she saw them more clearly. Professional soldiers, yes, but tired ones. Men who'd been chasing shadows for too long, ready for it to be over. Everyone was waiting when she entered the house, the questions starting immediately. She held up a hand for silence, then explained everything. The room erupted again. It's a trick, Marcus insisted. Has to be. Sign it, Mary said pragmatically. What does a piece of paper matter if it ends this without bloodshed? It's a lie, Ethan said quietly. You killed in defense of innocence. That's not murder. No, but it might be the price of peace. Caroline sat heavily, suddenly exhausted. If I don't sign, we fight tomorrow. We might win, but people will die. Tom, your sons might die. For what? My pride? My need to be right? For truth, Ethan said firmly. For justice. Justice? Caroline laughed bitterly. There's no justice in any of this. Just survival and the prices we pay for it. The debate continued through the afternoon and into the evening. Tom and his sons offered to fight regardless. Marcus insisted it was all a trap. Mary quietly prepared medical supplies for the wounded she expected tomorrow. And Ethan watched Caroline with those gray eyes, seeing too much, understanding too well the war going on inside her. That night, unable to sleep, Caroline found herself sitting by the dying fire with Ethan. Everyone else had bedded down, weapons close, waiting for dawn and whatever it would bring. You're going to sign it, he said. It wasn't a question. Does that disappoint you? No, it terrifies me. He took her hand, his fingers warm against her cold ones. "You're the strongest person I know, Caroline. If you're willing to do this, to take this blow to your honor, it's because you're protecting something, or someone. Everyone. I'm protecting everyone." She squeezed his hand. "Those are good men out there, but they're tired, cold, far from home. They don't want this fight any more than we do. If I can end it with ink instead of blood, you'll hate yourself for it." "Maybe. But I'll hate myself more if Tom's boys die defending my past." They sat in silence, watching the fire die to embers. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. If you sign, we weather the shame together. If you fight, we fight together. That's what marriage means." "Even a marriage of convenience? I thought we established it's not that anymore." He lifted their joined hands, kissed her knuckles gently. "I love you, Caroline. I should have said it sooner, but I love you. Not despite what you are, but because of it. Your strength, your scars, your refusal to break. I love all of it." Caroline turned to face him fully, seeing the truth in his eyes. "Ethan, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know, before tomorrow, whatever comes." But Caroline was already pulling him close, kissing him with all the desperate emotion of the moment. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you too. God help me, I do. You're the first good thing in my life since my father died." They held each other in the darkness, two damaged people finding wholeness in each other's arms. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere in the distance, wolves called to each other across the frozen valley. The world was harsh and unforgiving, but here, in this moment, there was warmth and love and possibility. Dawn came too soon, pale and bitter. Caroline dressed carefully, like a knight preparing for battle. Her knife went in its usual place, the derringer in her boot, but the real weapon would be the pen, if she chose to use it. "I'm coming with you," Ethan announced. "No, this is something I need to do alone." "Caroline, please, Ethan. Let me do this my way." He pulled her close, kissed her hard. "Come back to me. Always." She walked back to the tree line where Elizabeth Dalton waited with the documents and two of her men as witnesses. In the tent, Royce Dalton had deteriorated further, his breathing wet and labored. He might not last the day. "Have you decided?" Elizabeth asked. Caroline took the papers, read them carefully. They were exactly as Elizabeth had described: a confession to murder, an expression of regret, an acknowledgement of guilt. All lies, but convincing ones. She thought about William Dalton and his men, the way they'd looked at the women in the wagon train, the violence in their eyes. Thought about the girl, barely 14, whom Caroline had pulled from beneath William's body. Thought about justice and truth and the prices paid for both. Then she thought about Ethan, about Tom Morrison's sons, about Mary's steady hands that should heal, not have to dig bullets from flesh, about the future she was building in Devil's Bowl Valley, the life that was finally taking root after years of running. She signed the papers. Elizabeth's relief was palpable. She carefully put the documents away, then turned to her men. "We're leaving. Now, pack everything." "Ma'am," one of the men protested, The colonel is dying. Our business here is concluded." Her voice held unexpected authority. "Anyone who disagrees can find their own way home without pay." The men exchanged glances but began breaking camp. Elizabeth turned back to Caroline. "Thank you. I know what this cost you." "Do you?" "More than you might think. I've had to sign my own confessions, admit to my own lies to survive him." She glanced at the tent where her husband lay dying. "We do what we must to survive. That doesn't make us weak. It makes us survivors." Within an hour, they were gone. The tent, the men, Elizabeth Dalton, and her dying husband, all of it retreating into the winter landscape like a bad dream fading with daylight. Caroline stood in the snow, watching them disappear, feeling strangely empty. Ethan was waiting when she returned. He said nothing, just pulled her into his arms and held her while something inside her broke and reformed, different but maybe stronger. "Is it over?" Marcus asked from the doorway. "Yes." "Just like that?" Just like that. Marcus studied her for a long moment, understanding dawning in his eyes. You signed something, gave them what they wanted. I gave them paper and ink. They gave us our lives back. Caroline, it's done, Marcus. Let it be done. The Morrisons left that afternoon after many thanks and promises of future aid if needed. Marcus stayed another day, still weak but improving. On his last evening, he pulled Caroline aside. I'm heading to California, he said. There's nothing for me in the territories anymore. Too many ghosts. Will you be all right? Will you? He studied her face. You've changed, Caroline. Softer in some ways, harder in others. This place, this man, they're good for you. I know. Be happy. You've earned it. So have you, Marcus. He kissed her forehead gently, a farewell between old comrades, then went to shake Ethan's hand. The two men measured each other, some silent understanding passing between them. Take care of her, Marcus said. She takes care of herself. I just stand beside her. Good answer. Marcus left at dawn, heading south toward warmer territories and whatever future awaited him there. Caroline watched him go from the porch, Ethan beside her, their hands linked. Regrets? Ethan asked. No. That was another life. Another Caroline. She turned to face him. This is who I am now. Mrs. Caroline Calloway, rancher's wife, defender of Devil's Bowl Valley. Is that enough? More than enough. A week passed, then two. No word came from the outside world about the Daltons, about confessions or accusations. It was as if the whole thing had been a fever dream, except for the signed papers Caroline knew were out there somewhere, a bomb that might never explode or might destroy everything she'd built. But she couldn't live in fear of maybes. There was too much work to do, too much life to live. The cattle needed tending, the ranch needed running. The relationship with Ethan needed nurturing from convenience to something deeper, something that might last a lifetime. 3 weeks after the Daltons left, a package arrived via Tom Morrison, who'd been to town for supplies. It was addressed to Caroline in elegant feminine handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a daguerreotype. The paper read, He died 2 days after we left your valley. I burned your confession with his body. The debt is paid, the past is buried. Be free. E.D. The daguerreotype showed Elizabeth Dalton standing before what looked like a Spanish mission, wearing a simple dress, her face turned toward the sun. She looked younger, lighter, free. On the back was written, California, 1889, New Beginnings. Caroline burned both the letter and the photograph, watching them turn to ash in the fireplace. Ethan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Good news? The best. It's over. Really over. So what now? Caroline turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd become her anchor, her partner, her unexpected love. Now we live. We build. We defend what's ours. Together? Together. Spring came early to Devil's Bowl Valley that year, the snow melting to reveal green grass, wildflowers, new life pushing through the earth. Caroline and Ethan worked side by side, expanding the ranch, improving the house, building something lasting. The railroad made one more attempt to buy them out, sending representatives with offers and veiled threats. But they found a united front, the Calloways and the Morrisons, and the other small ranchers of the valley standing together. The railroad eventually found another route to their mines, more expensive but less troublesome than fighting people who'd already proven they wouldn't break. By summer, Caroline's belly had begun to round with new life. Ethan's child, their child, a future neither had imagined possible. Mary Morrison, attending her with herbs and wisdom, proclaimed it a strong baby, a fighter like its mother. Are you ready for this? Ethan asked one evening, his hand gentle on her expanding middle. I've fought wars, survived bullets and blades, faced down my past. How hard can one baby be? He laughed, kissed her temple. Spoken like someone who's never dealt with a colicky infant at 3 a.m. Then you'll have to teach me, like I taught you to fight. Deal. They sat on the porch they'd expanded, watching the sun set over their valley. The past was behind them, burned and buried. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer fearsome. And the present, this moment, this life, this love, was more than either had dared dream when they'd stood before that bored justice of the peace in Bitterhorn Ridge. Caroline thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach just months ago, scarred and running, advertising herself like livestock because she saw no other choice. That woman was gone, transformed into something new. Not softer, she still kept her knife sharp and her rifle loaded, but fuller, more complete. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked. "That mail-order bride advertisement was the best thing I ever wrote. Even though 3 men rejected you, they weren't the right men. I needed someone who could see past the warrior to the woman, but also accept that the warrior was part of the woman. And you found him? He found me." As darkness fell over Devil's Bowl Valley, they went inside together, to their home, their life, their future. The past might have shaped them, scarred them, brought them to this point, but it no longer defined them. They were no longer a desperate woman and a lonely man bound by convenience and mutual need. They were partners, lovers, family. They were home. The first labor pain hit Caroline like a gunshot to the gut, dropping her to her knees in the garden where she'd been pulling early September weeds. The basket of vegetables scattered across the dirt as she gripped her swollen belly, breathing hard through clenched teeth. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. Mary Morrison had said another 2 weeks at least. "Ethan!" she managed to call out, though it came as more of a gasp. He was at the barn, she knew, checking on a sick calf. Too far to hear her. Caroline struggled to her feet, using the garden fence for support. Another pain crashed through her, stronger than the first, and she bit down on her own hand to keep from screaming. Something was wrong. This didn't feel like what Mary had described. Blood. She could feel it, warm and wrong, soaking through her dress. Too much blood. Caroline started toward the house, each step in agony when she saw them. Riders coming down from the North Ridge. 6 of them, moving fast and purposeful. Not neighbors. She knew every horse in the valley by now. These were strangers, and strangers meant trouble. She forced herself to move faster, fighting through another contraction that nearly blinded her with pain. Her rifle was in the house, loaded and ready like always. If she could just reach it. The riders were closer now, close enough that she could see their faces. Hard men, weathered and armed. But it was the woman riding in their midst that made Caroline's blood run cold despite the fire in her belly. Elizabeth Dalton. Number. It couldn't be. Elizabeth had promised, had burned the confession, had started a new life in California. The daguerreotype had proved it. But there she was, riding side saddle in an elegant black dress, her face cold and composed as a marble. She'd changed, harder now, the softness gone from her features. And her eyes held something Caroline recognized too well. Vengeance. Caroline made it to the porch steps before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the railing, one hand pressed to her belly, the other reaching for the knife still strapped to her thigh beneath her blood-stained dress. Elizabeth dismounted gracefully, approaching with the confidence of someone who held all the cards. Her men spread out, surrounding the house with practiced efficiency. "Hello, Caroline," Elizabeth said, stopping just out of knife range. "Smart woman." "Surprised to see me?" "You burned it," Caroline gasped through another contraction. "You said the debt was paid." "I lied." Elizabeth's smile was winter cold. "Just like you've been lying to yourself, thinking you could have this perfect little life after what you did. Your husband was dying. You wanted free of him." "Yes, and you gave me that freedom, for which I'm grateful, truly." Elizabeth pulled something from her saddlebag, papers, legal documents from the look of them. "But you see, Royce left me nothing. Absolutely nothing. The estate was bankrupt, the fortune spent on hunting you. All I inherited were debts and shame." "That's not my fault, isn't it?" Elizabeth's composure cracked slightly, showing the rage beneath. "You killed William. That started Royce's obsession. That obsession destroyed our lives, our fortune, everything. So yes, Caroline, it is your fault, and you're going to pay for it." Another contraction hit, and Caroline couldn't hold back the scream this time. Fresh blood pooled beneath her, and she saw Elizabeth's eyes widen slightly. "You're in labor." "Something's wrong," Caroline admitted through gritted teeth. "The baby—" "How unfortunate. I'd planned to take my time with this, but it seems nature has its own schedule." Elizabeth gestured to her men. "Search the house. Take everything of value and find her husband." "He's not here," Caroline lied, praying Ethan would stay in the barn, would hear the strangers and hide. "Then we wait. He'll come when he hears you screaming." Elizabeth crouched down, still carefully out of reach. "You signed a confession, remember? Murder in cold blood." "I didn't burn it. I filed it with a judge in Kansas, along with testimony from witnesses I paid very well. There's a warrant for your arrest, Caroline, dead or alive. The statute of limitations doesn't apply to murder. A good lawyer explained that to me after Royce died. You see, I spent these months not in California but in Kansas building a case, finding people who would swear they saw you kill William unprovoked. Amazing what poverty will make people remember." Caroline's vision was starting to blur from pain and blood loss. She could feel the baby moving, struggling, something definitely wrong with how it was positioned. Mary had warned her about breech births, about babies turned wrong. Without help, both she and the child would die. Where was Ethan? As if reading her thoughts, Elizabeth stood and called out, "Mr. Calloway, your wife is dying. Come out and perhaps I'll let you save her." Silence. Then, from somewhere behind the barn, Ethan's voice, steady and carrying, "Let her go and you can have me." "I don't want you, Mr. Calloway. I want justice for my husband, even if he was a monster. I want payment for my ruined life. Come out unarmed and I'll consider letting you take her to town for a doctor." Caroline tried to call out, to warn him it was a trap. But another contraction stole her breath. The world was going gray at the edges, darkness creeping in. She heard footsteps, saw Ethan emerge from behind the barn, hands raised, rifle left behind. His eyes found hers, and she saw him take in the blood, the pain, the situation in one glance. His face went deadly calm, the expression she'd only seen when he talked about Andersonville. "Let me help her," he said to Elizabeth. "Whatever grievance you have, she's dying." "The baby's dying." "Everyone dies, Mr. Calloway. Some just deserve it more than others." Elizabeth pulled a revolver from beneath her elegant jacket. "But I'm not entirely heartless. You can hold her while she goes. Call it a kindness." Ethan started toward Caroline, but one of Elizabeth's men stepped in his path, rifle raised. "No closer." That's when they heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them, coming fast from the east. Tom Morrison's war cry split the air, a Blackfoot battle call his wife had taught him. The cavalry was coming. Elizabeth spun, shouting orders to her men, but Tom and his sons were already on them, firing from horseback. Mary Morrison was with them, riding like a warrior herself, and behind them came more, other ranchers from the valley, men who'd heard trouble was coming and rode to help. The yard erupted in gunfire. Ethan dove for Caroline, covering her body with his as bullets whined overhead. She could feel his heart hammering against her back, could hear him whispering prayers or curses, or both. "The baby!" she gasped. "Ethan, the baby's coming wrong." "I know. I can see it. Caroline, I need you to trust me." He was already moving, his hands sure despite the battle raging around them. "I've delivered breech babies before in the war, but this is going to hurt. Do it." What followed was agony beyond anything Caroline had experienced. Ethan's hands, skilled from years of field medicine, working to turn the baby while bullets shattered windows above them. She screamed, couldn't help it, the sound lost in the chaos of battle. Tom Morrison had reached the house, throwing himself from his horse to provide cover. "How bad?" he shouted over the gunfire. "Bad. I need Mary," Ethan called back. "Little busy right now." Mary's voice came from somewhere near the barn where she'd taken cover, still firing with deadly accuracy. Caroline could see Elizabeth through her pain-blurred vision, the elegant woman now crouched behind the water trough, her beautiful dress splattered with mud and blood, though whose blood Caroline couldn't tell. Their eyes met across the battlefield of the yard, and Caroline saw something break in Elizabeth's face. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This was supposed to be clean vengeance, not this chaos. Then Caroline felt it. The baby turning, Ethan's hands guiding it with desperate skill, One more push, one more moment of tearing agony, and then a cry. Thin and angry, but alive. Definitely alive. "It's a girl," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Caroline, we have a daughter." Through her tears and pain, Caroline saw the baby, tiny, blood-covered, but breathing. Fighting. A warrior from her first breath. The gunfire was dying down. 2 of Elizabeth's men were dead, 1 wounded. The others had thrown down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. Elizabeth herself stood slowly, her revolver hanging loose in her hand, staring at the crying baby in Ethan's arms. "A daughter," she said softly, something strange in her voice. "Royce and we tried for years. Never could." She raised the gun, but not at Caroline, at her own temple. "Maybe this is justice after all." "No!" Mary Morrison had appeared, moving faster than seemed possible, knocking the gun from Elizabeth's hand. "You don't get to die easy. You live with what you've done." Tom Morrison and his sons had the surviving men under guard. Other ranchers were checking the dead, securing weapons. The battle was over as quickly as it had begun, leaving the yard looking like a war zone. "Caroline needs a doctor," Ethan said urgently. "She's lost too much blood." "No doctor in town will help her," Elizabeth said dully. "Not with the warrant I filed. They'll arrest her the moment she shows her face." "Then you'll fix it," Mary said, her rifle now pointed at Elizabeth's head. "You'll write a statement saying you lied, that you fabricated evidence. You'll clear her name. Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," Mary said calmly, "I'll stake you out in the mountains and let nature take its course. The wolves are hungry this time of year, or maybe the bears. I haven't decided." Elizabeth looked at Mary's face, saw the truth there. Then she looked at Caroline, pale and bleeding but still conscious, holding her newborn daughter with shaking hands. "Get me paper," Elizabeth said finally. "I'll write your statement." It took an hour. An hour of Elizabeth writing while Mary worked on Caroline, packing the bleeding, cleaning the wounds, doing everything her healing knowledge allowed. An hour of Ethan holding their daughter, whispering to her about the valley that would be her home, the mountains that would be her playground, the strong woman who was her mother. When Elizabeth finished writing, a full confession of her lies, her fabricated evidence, her attempt at false prosecution, Tom Morrison read it through carefully. "This will hold up in court? I was married to a lawyer's son for 7 years. I know how to make things legal." Elizabeth's voice was empty, defeated. "May I go now?" "Where?" Mary asked. "You have nothing. No one." "Exactly." Elizabeth stood, her once elegant dress ruined, her carefully styled hair wild. "I have nothing, which means I have nothing left to lose. Caroline took everything from me, even my revenge. Let me disappear into that nothing." Caroline, weak but aware, spoke up. "Let her go." Everyone turned to stare at her. "She's broken," Caroline continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Broken like I was. Like Ethan was. Maybe she'll find something in that brokenness. Or maybe she'll just fade away. Either way, the cycle ends here." Mary clearly disagreed but respected Caroline's choice. Tom Morrison escorted Elizabeth to her horse. One horse, no supplies beyond what was in the saddlebags. The elegant woman who'd ridden in with vengeance was replaced by a hollow-eyed ghost riding away alone. "She'll be back," Mary warned. "No," Caroline said, certain somehow. "She won't. She's got nothing left to come back for." The other ranchers took the surviving gunmen to town to face justice. Tom and his family stayed, helping clean up the battlefield of the yard, fixing the windows, making the house secure again. But Caroline barely noticed. All her attention was on the tiny life in her arms, this unexpected miracle born in blood and violence. "She needs a name," Ethan said, sitting beside Caroline's bed where Mary had insisted she rest. "Rose," Caroline said immediately. "After my mother." "Rose Elizabeth Calloway." "Elizabeth? After a woman who lost everything to vengeance, a reminder that hate costs more than it's worth." Ethan kissed her forehead gently. "You're a better person than I am. I'd have let Mary shoot her." "No, you wouldn't." "You're a healer, remember? You save people, even when they don't deserve it." "I saved you." I saved you right back. Baby Rose made a small sound, not quite a cry, more an announcement of presence. She had Ethan's dark hair, but Caroline's green eyes, already alert and watching everything. She's going to be trouble, Mary announced, checking on them one more time before leaving. I can see it in her eyes. Warrior's eyes, like her mother. God help us, Ethan muttered, but he was smiling. The weeks that followed were a blur of recovery and adjustment. Caroline healed slowly but surely, her body as resilient as always despite the trauma. Rose thrived, growing strong on her mother's milk and her father's endless attention. The house, once a sterile bachelor's quarters, became a true home filled with baby cries and laughter and the controlled chaos of new parenthood. Word came from town that the surviving gunman had testified about Elizabeth Dalton's plot, confirming her written confession. The warrant for Caroline's arrest was withdrawn, the case closed. Caroline Calloway was officially innocent of all charges, free to live without looking over her shoulder. Marcus sent a letter from California, having heard the news through his network of old soldiers and wanderers. He was glad she was safe, glad she'd found peace. He'd met a woman, a widow with 2 children, who didn't mind his scars or his nightmares. Maybe he'd found peace too. Winter came again to Devil's Bowl, but this time Caroline didn't watch it with wary eyes. She stood on the porch, Rose bundled in her arms, Ethan beside her, watching snow fall gentle and clean on their valley. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked, echoing his question from so long ago. "About what? Marrying a stranger? Fighting off gunmen while in labor? Naming our daughter after the woman who tried to kill me?" "Any of it. All of it." Caroline adjusted Rose's blanket, feeling the warm weight of her daughter, the solid presence of her husband, the peace of their hard-won home. "No regrets. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Even though you were rejected 3 times as a mail-order bride?" "Especially because of that. Those rejections led me here. To you. To this." She looked up at him, this man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. "I was too wild for them, too fierce. But not for you. Never for me." He kissed her, gentle and sure, while Rose made contented baby sounds between them. Spring came with its usual promise of renewal. The ranch prospered, the cattle multiplied, the garden Caroline planted actually grew this time. Rose learned to crawl, then walk, exploring her world with the fearlessness of a child who'd entered it fighting. One day, while Caroline was teaching Rose to feed the chickens, the same feral chickens that had finally been coaxed down from the loft, a rider approached. Caroline's hand went automatically to where her knife used to be, then relaxed. She didn't wear it anymore, though it was never far away. Old habits died hard, but they did die. The rider was a young woman, perhaps 20, with the lean look of someone who'd been traveling hard. She stopped at a respectful distance, hands visible, no threat in her posture. "Mrs. Calloway?" "Caroline Calloway?" "Yes?" "My name is Sarah Fletcher. I saw your advertisement from 2 years ago, the one about marriage." Caroline almost laughed. That advertisement, the desperate plea of a hunted woman, seemed like a lifetime ago. "I'm already married, Miss Fletcher." "I know. That's not why I'm here." The young woman dismounted, and Caroline could see the exhaustion in her movements, the kind that came from more than just hard travel. "I'm running, like you were. There are men, bad men, following me. I heard about you in town, about how you fought off those gunmen, how you stood your ground. And I want to learn. I want to be strong like you. I can work. I'm not afraid of labor. I need to not be afraid all the time." Caroline studied the young woman, seeing herself 2 years ago, desperate, fierce, ready to fight, but not sure how. She looked back at Ethan, who'd come from the barn at the sound of a stranger. He nodded slightly. They'd already discussed this possibility, the fact that their valley had become known as a place where the desperate could find shelter. "Can you shoot?" Caroline asked. "No." "Use a knife?" "No." "Defend yourself at all?" "No. But I can learn. I will learn." Caroline picked up Rose, who was grabbing for the chickens with determined hands. "The work is hard. The winter is harder, and I don't coddle anyone. I don't want coddling. I want to survive. Surviving isn't enough. You need to learn to live. Caroline started toward the house. Come inside. You look like you need a meal and about 3 days of sleep. Then we'll see about teaching you to be fierce. Sarah Fletcher followed, hope dawning in her tired eyes. As they walked, Ethan fell into step beside Caroline. Taking in strays now, he murmured, but his tone was warm. Paying forward a debt. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do here, give chances to people who've run out of them. A ranch for misfits and warriors, the best kind of ranch. That evening, with Sarah sleeping in the spare room they'd built for Rose, who still slept with her parents, Caroline and Ethan sat on their expanded porch, watching sunset paint their valley gold. We've come a long way from that hotel in Bitterhorn Ridge, Ethan observed, from a convenience marriage to whatever this is. I know what it is. He pulled her close, Rose babbling happily on his lap. It's love, messy, complicated, battle-tested love, with a side of taking in desperate women and teaching them to fight. Everyone needs a hobby. Caroline laughed, the sound carrying across the valley they'd fought so hard to protect. Tomorrow there would be more work, cattle to tend, Sarah to start training, Rose to keep from eating bugs or climbing too high. There would be challenges, always challenges. The railroad might return. Other threats might emerge. That was the nature of life on the frontier, perhaps the nature of life anywhere. But tonight, with her husband beside her and her daughter in her arms, with their home secure and their future bright, Caroline Calloway allowed herself a moment of perfect contentment. She'd been a mail-order bride rejected for being too fierce, too scarred, too much a warrior. Now she was all those things and more. Wife, mother, teacher, defender. She thought about that desperate advertisement she'd placed. The woman who'd written it convinced she had nothing to offer but her ability to work and fight. That woman couldn't have imagined this. Love, family, purpose, peace. The battle in her eyes hadn't gone away. It had just found something worth fighting for. What are you thinking? Ethan asked, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. That Elizabeth Dalton was wrong. Everyone doesn't die. Some of us live. Really live. Despite everything, we live. To living, then. He kissed her temple, gentle and sure. To living, Caroline agreed. Rose reached up, grabbing at her mother's face with sticky hands, and Caroline kissed those tiny fingers, this proof of life and love and future. The warrior in her eyes had chosen this man, this place, this life. And every battle fought, every scar earned, every mile run had been worth it to reach this moment. The stars came out over Devil's Bowl Valley, brilliant in the clear mountain air. Inside the house, Sarah Fletcher slept, safe for perhaps the first time in months. Tomorrow, Caroline would start teaching her to fight, to defend, to be fierce when the world demanded it. But she'd also teach her what Caroline had learned, that the greatest courage wasn't in the fighting, but in the choosing to build something after the fighting was done. The night was peaceful, filled with the ordinary sounds of a working ranch, horses nickering, cattle lowing, the distant howl of wolves that no longer sounded threatening. Caroline Rose Calloway, former mail-order bride, warrior woman, survivor of wars both public and private, sat with her family on the porch of the home they'd defended with blood and courage and love. She was not too fierce for this life. She was exactly fierce enough. Sarah Fletcher's scream pierced the morning quiet, jolting Caroline from where she'd been teaching Rose to gather eggs. The young woman they'd taken in 3 months ago stood frozen in the barn doorway, her face white as winter snow, pointing at something inside with a trembling hand. Caroline handed Rose to Ethan, who'd come running from the house, and approached the barn carefully. Her knife was back on her thigh these days. Sarah's arrival had reminded her that peace was always temporary, always conditional. She peered around the doorframe and her blood went cold. A man hung from the rafters, his body swaying slightly in the morning breeze that came through the open loft door. But it wasn't just any man. It was Henry Dalton, Elizabeth's brother-in-law, Royce's younger brother, the last of the Dalton men. A note was pinned to his chest, the writing visible even from the door. "Get Sarah inside," Caroline told Ethan quietly, "and keep Rose away from here." Ethan understood immediately. guiding the shocked young woman back toward the house while shielding Rose's curious eyes. Caroline entered the barn alone, her footsteps careful on the hay-strewn floor. She'd seen enough death to recognize that Henry had been dead for hours, probably since before midnight. The rope was professional, the knot one she recognized from military executions. She climbed up to cut him down. Even enemies deserved better than being left hanging like strange fruit. As she worked, she read the note pinned to his chest. The last payment for a debt that was never ours. He came to finish what his brother started. I finished it instead. You gave me nothing, so I give you peace. We are even now. E.D. Elizabeth. Somehow Caroline wasn't surprised. The woman who'd ridden away broken and empty had found one last piece of vengeance, not against Caroline, but against the family that had destroyed her life as surely as they'd tried to destroy Caroline's. By the time she got Henry's body down and covered with a horse blanket, Tom Morrison had arrived. Word traveled fast in the valley when something was wrong, and Sarah's scream had carried far in the still morning air. "Dalton?" Tom asked, looking at the covered form. "The last one. Henry. Elizabeth killed him." Tom's eyebrows rose. "The woman who tried to kill you came back to kill him? He must have been hunting me." She found him first. Caroline showed him the note. "This is her idea of making amends, I think. Or maybe just cleaning up the last of her past before she disappears completely." "Where is she now?" Caroline looked out at the mountains, their peaks already white with early autumn snow. "Gone. Really gone this time. This was her final act. They buried Henry Dalton in an unmarked grave at the edge of the property, no word said over it except Ethan's quiet, 'May God have mercy on your soul,' because the earth sure didn't. The sheriff came from town, took statements, and declared it a case of frontier justice best left closed. The Dalton name had become poison in these parts. Nobody would mourn the last of them. But the incident had shaken Sarah badly. That evening, Caroline found her packing her few belongings, hands still trembling. "I can't do this," Sarah said without looking up. "I thought I could be strong like you, but I saw that body and I just froze. If that had been the men hunting me, I'd be dead." Caroline sat on the bed beside her, remembering her own trembling hands so many years ago. "The first dead body I saw up close was my father's. Not his actual body, that never came home from Antietam, but one of his soldiers who made it back just to die in our parlor. I was 9. I froze too. But you got over it." "No. I just learned to move through the freezing." Caroline took Sarah's hands, feeling the calluses that had formed from 3 months of ranch work. "You've been here 12 weeks. You can shoot now. Not well, but you can. You can ride, you can defend yourself with a knife, you can read the land for danger. That's not nothing. It's not enough. It's never enough. That's the secret nobody tells you. No matter how strong you get, how fierce you become, there's always something that can break you. The trick is learning to bend instead." Sarah looked up, tears streaking her face. "What if I can't? What if I'm just a scared girl playing at being brave?" "Then you're like every other person who's ever had to fight for their life. We're all playing at being brave, Sarah. Some of us have just been playing longer." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mary Morrison entered, and Caroline was surprised to see her carrying a rifle and wearing traveling clothes. "We have a problem," Mary said without preamble. "The men hunting Sarah, they're in town. 5 of them asking questions. They know she came this direction." Sarah went even paler, if that was possible. Caroline stood, her hand going to her knife. "How long?" "They'll be here by tomorrow, maybe tonight if they push hard." Mary looked at Sarah with unexpected gentleness. "What did you do, child, that made them hunt you so hard?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I killed my husband." The words hung in the air like smoke. Caroline and Mary exchanged glances, a whole conversation in that look. They'd both suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed changed things. "Tell us," Caroline said simply. Sarah's story came out in halting pieces. An arranged marriage to a wealthy rancher in Wyoming, years of beatings, worse things she couldn't name. The night he'd gotten too drunk, too violent, and she'd fought back with a kitchen knife. The money he'd stolen from his partners that she'd taken when she ran. The hired guns his family sent after her, Not for justice, but to recover the money and silence her forever. How much money? Mary asked practically. $20,000. Ethan whistled low from the doorway where he'd appeared. That's enough to buy half the valley. It's blood money, Sarah said. I don't even want it. I couldn't leave it for them. Caroline was already thinking, planning, her mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept her alive through so many battles. Where is it? Hidden, buried near the old mine shaft you showed me last month. Smart. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Caroline looked at each of them in turn. Mary, ride back to town. Let it slip, accidentally, that Sarah was seen heading north toward Canada. Buy us time. And if they don't believe me, then we fight. But I'd rather choose our battlefield than have them choose it. Caroline turned to Sarah. You're going to write a letter to your husband's family, offering to return the money in exchange for them calling off the hunt. They'll never agree. They will if we make it appealing enough. Ethan, we'll need Tom and his boys again. This is getting to be a habit. Caroline, Ethan said quietly, we just got free of one vendetta. Do we really want to take on another? She met his eyes, seeing the concern there, but also the resignation. He already knew her answer. We took Sarah in. That makes her ours to protect. Besides, she added with a ghost of a smile, what's the point of learning to be fierce if you never use it for anything worthwhile? The next day was spent in preparation. Tom Morrison and his sons arrived before dawn, along with 2 other ranchers who owed Ethan favors. Sarah's letter was sent with a neutral party, the town priest, who agreed to act as intermediary. The money was dug up and moved to a more strategic location. And Caroline spent hours with Sarah, drilling her on what to do when the moment came. You're not a victim anymore, Caroline told her as they practiced with knives in the barn. You're a survivor. There's power in that if you claim it. What if I can't? What if I freeze again? Then I'll fight for you until you can fight for yourself. That's what we do here. We stand for each other. The response came at sunset. The priest returned with a counteroffer. Sarah would bring the money to neutral ground, the old mission 5 miles south, and exchange it for a signed document absolving her of all crimes. She had to come alone. It's a trap, everyone said in unison. Of course it's a trap, Caroline agreed, but it's also an opportunity. They'll be expecting Sarah alone, scared, ready to surrender. They won't expect her to come with an army. I don't have an army, Sarah protested. Caroline smiled, and it was the smile that had terrified hardened gunmen. Yes, you do. The plan was complex but elegant. Sarah would ride to the mission as demanded, the money in her saddlebags. But she wouldn't be alone. Caroline and Mary would already be there, hidden in the mission ruins. Ethan and Tom would position themselves on the ridges overlooking the meeting spot. Tom's sons would watch the roads. And if things went bad, when things went bad, they'd spring the trap. What makes you think they'll honor any agreement? Sarah asked as they prepared to ride out. I don't. But I think they want the money more than they want you dead. $20,000 buys a lot of forgiveness, even for a murdered husband. They moved into position under cover of darkness. The mission was a crumbling adobe structure, abandoned for decades, its walls providing perfect cover for an ambush. Caroline and Mary settled into their spots, rifles ready, while Ethan's voice came soft over the distance. He and Tom were in position. Sarah arrived at dawn as instructed, looking small and frightened on her horse. It was partly an act, Caroline knew, but only partly. The fear was real. But so was the steel Caroline had been forging in her for 3 months. The hunters came from the north, 5 men spread in a semicircle, preventing escape. Their leader was a thin man with dead eyes and a sheriff's badge that was probably as fake as his smile. Mrs. Garrett, he called to Sarah, so good to finally find you. I have the money, Sarah called back, her voice shaking only slightly. All of it. Take it and leave me be. Oh, we'll take it. But you see, Mr. Garrett's family wants more than money. They want justice. Murder isn't justice. Neither is stabbing a man 14 times while he slept. He wasn't sleeping, Sarah said, and her voice was stronger now. He was drunk and trying to rape me, again. That's not the story his family tells. His family wasn't there. The man dismounted, walking closer, his hand casual on his gun. Doesn't matter what the truth is, little girl. Only thing that matters is who has the power, and out here, that's us. That's when Caroline stood up from her hiding spot, rifle aimed at his head. Funny thing about power, it shifts. The hunters went for their guns, but Mary was already up too, and Ethan and Tom's rifles cracked from the ridges. One man fell immediately, another cursed as a bullet took his gun hand. The leader dove for cover, but there wasn't much to find in the open ground before the mission. "Here's how this goes," Caroline called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded in battle. "You take the money and ride away, or we bury you here." Simple choice. "You're bluffing. You won't kill lawmen." "What lawmen?" Tom Morrison called from the ridge. "All I see are hired killers with fake badges hunting a woman who defended herself." The wounded man was moaning, clutching his shattered hand. Another was trying to crawl to better cover. The leader looked around, calculating odds, and Caroline could see the moment he realized he was outmaneuvered. "The money," he said finally. "Give us the money and we leave." Sarah dismounted, pulled the saddlebags free, and tossed them halfway between her position and his. "Take it. But I want something in writing, a document saying the debt is paid, the hunt is over." "I don't have the authority." Caroline's rifle cracked, the bullet hitting the ground an inch from his boot. "Find it." With shaking hands, the man wrote out a crude document absolving Sarah of all crimes, signed it, had his surviving men sign it. Sarah made him write it again, clearer this time, more legal. She'd learned from Elizabeth Dalton's example. Paperwork mattered, even out here. When it was done, the hunters collected their money and their wounded and rode away. But Caroline didn't relax until Tom's sons reported they'd passed the valley boundaries, heading south toward Wyoming. "It's over?" Sarah asked, disbelief in her voice. "This part is," Caroline said, "but they might come back." Men like that, they don't like being beaten, especially by women. Then what do I do? You keep learning, you keep getting stronger, and you build a life that's worth defending. Caroline looked at the young woman she'd been training, seeing the changes 3 months had wrought. "You're not the same scared girl who showed up at our door. You stood your ground today. You negotiated from a position of strength. That's no small thing." They rode back to the ranch together, the morning sun warming their backs. Rose toddled out to meet them, walking now with the determined gait of a child who'd inherited her mother's stubbornness. Ethan scooped her up, but she reached for Caroline, babbling, "Mama," with obvious delight. "Your daughter's going to be a handful," Mary observed. "Look at her eyes." She's already planning something. "Probably world domination," Ethan said dryly. "It's in the blood." That evening, they all gathered for dinner, an extended family forged by circumstance and choice. Tom's family, Mary with her healing herbs and warrior's heart, Sarah still shaking from the day's events but smiling for the first time in months. And at the center, Caroline and Ethan and Rose, the unlikely family that had become the heart of this small revolution. "I should leave," Sarah said suddenly. "You've all risked so much for me. If those men come back, then we'll deal with them," Caroline cut her off. "That's what we do. We stand together, we fight together, and we build something worth fighting for together." "Besides," Ethan added, "winter's coming. You try traveling these passes in snow, you'll freeze before any hunter finds you. You're stuck with us until spring at least." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they seemed like the good kind. "I don't know how to thank you." "Learn to fight," Caroline said simply. "Not just with weapons, but with will. Become someone who can stand for others the way we're standing for you. That's thanks enough." Winter came early and harsh that year, sealing the valley in a fortress of snow and ice. The hunters didn't return. Whether because of the weather or the document Sarah had secured, they never knew. Sarah grew stronger, more confident, her skills with rifle and knife improving daily. She also showed an unexpected talent for teaching, working with Rose. Teaching the toddler her letters and numbers with patience Caroline admired but couldn't quite match. "You'd make a good mother," Caroline told her one day, watching Sarah help Rose with a simple puzzle. "Maybe someday, when I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore." That day might never come. I was looking over mine when Rose was born. Sometimes you have to build your life in the middle of the storm, not after it passes. Spring brought unexpected visitors. A wagon train, heading west to Oregon, had gotten lost in a late storm and stumbled into the valley. Among them were 3 women, all running from something: an abusive father, a forced marriage, a crime they wouldn't name. They'd heard rumors in town about the ranch in Devil's Bowl, where desperate women could find shelter. "We're not a charity," Caroline told them, but Ethan was already bringing out food and blankets. "No," he agreed, "but we're not heartless either. They can stay until the weather clears, then decide." 2 of the women moved on with the wagon train. The third, a quiet girl named Anna who bore whip scars on her back, asked to stay. "I can work," she said. "I'm good with animals, and I can read and write. I could teach children if there were any." "There will be," Mary Morrison said with a knowing smile at Caroline's belly. Caroline looked down, startled. She hadn't realized she was showing yet, had barely admitted to herself what the morning sickness and missed courses meant. Another baby. Another life to protect in this harsh land. "Well," she said to Anna, "I suppose we're building a school now, too." By summer, the ranch had transformed. What had started as a desperate marriage between 2 damaged people had become something unprecedented, a community of survivors, mostly women, all learning to be fierce in their own ways. Sarah had become Caroline's second in command, teaching new arrivals the basics of self-defense. Anna started a small school teaching not just Rose but children from neighboring ranches whose families were willing to have their daughters learn alongside boys. Mary Morrison provided medical care and wisdom in equal measure. And Caroline, the mail-order bride who'd been rejected for being too fierce, presided over it all with Ethan at her side. They'd built something from nothing, created safety from chaos, forged family from strangers. "You know what they're calling this place in town?" Tom Morrison asked one day, accepting coffee from Ethan on the porch. "I can imagine," Caroline said, her hand resting on her growing belly. "The sanctuary. They say any woman who's desperate enough can find shelter here, learn to fight, learn to live free." He paused. "They also say you're teaching them things proper women shouldn't know." "Proper women don't survive out here," Caroline replied. "We're teaching them to be improper and alive rather than proper and dead." "The town council's not happy about it. They think you're encouraging wives to leave their husbands." "Only the ones who beat them," Ethan said mildly. "Strange how that threatens some men." Tom laughed. "You've started something here, something important, but important things always draw opposition." He was right. Within a month, a delegation from town arrived. The sheriff, the mayor, 2 council members, and the priest who'd helped with Sarah's negotiation. They stood in the yard looking officious and uncomfortable as Caroline faced them, 7 months pregnant but still formidable. "Mrs. Calloway," the mayor began, "we've come about your establishment. My ranch. Your school for wayward women." Caroline smiled, and several of the men stepped back. "Is that what we're calling it?" "I prefer sanctuary for survivors." "You're teaching women violence," the sheriff accused. "I'm teaching them self-defense. There's a difference. You're harboring criminals. I'm sheltering abuse victims. Also a difference." The priest stepped forward. "Mrs. Calloway, surely you understand the concern. The natural order." "The natural order." Caroline's voice could have cut glass. "The natural order that says a man can beat his wife to death and face no consequences? The natural order that says a woman should submit to rape rather than defend herself? That natural order?" The Bible says a lot of things, including do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I doubt any of you would want to be beaten, raped, or murdered. Yet you come here to tell me I shouldn't teach women to prevent those things. Ethan moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and supportive. "Gentlemen, my wife is providing a service this valley needs. These women work our ranch, contribute to our community, and ask nothing but the chance to live safely. If that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why." The mayor puffed up. "We could shut you down, make things difficult." "You could try," Caroline agreed, "but I think you'll find that difficult to do. See, we provide beef to half the valley at fair prices. We employ a dozen people. We pay our taxes. And most importantly," she smiled again, this time with teeth, "we have very good lawyers." "Lawyers?" courtesy of our friend Elizabeth Dalton, who left us well connected before she disappeared. Any legal action against us will be met with enthusiasm. It was partly bluff. Elizabeth had left no such thing, but the men didn't know that. The Dalton name still carried weight, even in disgrace. The delegation left, muttering threats they'd never follow through on. The ranch was too important to the valley's economy now, and the women Caroline trained were becoming part of the fabric of the frontier community, whether the traditional authorities liked it or not. Caroline's second child came easier than the first, perhaps because there were no gunfights involved. A boy this time, whom they named James after Ethan's father. He had Caroline's fierce green eyes and his father's steady temperament, a perfect balance. 2 children, Ethan marveled, holding James while Rose tried to climb onto his shoulders. When I put that advertisement in for a mail-order bride, I never imagined this. Regrets? Caroline asked, echoing their old refrain. Never. You? Only that it took me so long to find you. The ranch continued to grow. Some women stayed permanently, becoming part of the extended family. Others learned what they needed and moved on, carrying their new strength into the world. Sarah eventually left for San Francisco, where she opened a boarding house for women in need, using skills both domestic and martial that Caroline had taught her. She wrote regularly, telling of lives saved, women empowered, the ripples of Devil's Bowl Valley spreading far beyond Montana. Anna married one of Tom Morrison's sons, a love match that surprised everyone except Mary, who'd seen it coming months before. She continued teaching, and the little school grew into a proper institution, accepting students from across the valley regardless of gender or race, a radical concept that horrified traditionalists and delighted progressives. On Rose's 5th birthday, as the extended family gathered to celebrate, Caroline stood on the porch looking out at what they'd built. The ranch had tripled in size. The house had grown to accommodate the constant flow of residents. Gardens flourished where only wild grass had grown. Children's laughter filled the air, Rose and James and a dozen others whose mothers had found sanctuary here. You did this, Ethan said, joining her. We did this. No, Caroline. I had the land, but you had the vision. You turned a lonely ranch into a revolution. A quiet revolution. The best kind. The kind that changes lives one person at a time. Mary Morrison approached, and Caroline could tell from her expression that something was wrong. Riders coming. 6 of them, armed. Caroline's hand went to her knife, still worn, still sharp, still ready. Trouble? Maybe. But they're carrying a white flag. The riders stopped at the gate, their leader a woman Caroline recognized with a start. Elizabeth Dalton, but transformed. Gone was the elegant Eastern lady. In her place sat a woman in practical clothes, her face tanned by sun, her posture confident rather than desperate. Caroline, she called. May I approach? After a long moment, Caroline nodded. Elizabeth rode forward alone, dismounting with easy grace. You look well, Elizabeth said. So do you. California agreed with you? Texas, actually. I started over there. Elizabeth's smile was genuine, perhaps for the first time. I heard what you've built here. I wanted to see it. Why? Because I helped build it, in a way. My attack, my failure, it proved you could defend this place, defend these women. It gave you a reputation that keeps other predators away. That's one way to look at it. Elizabeth pulled out an envelope, heavy with documents. I've spent 2 years building something too. A fund for women like us. Women who need to disappear, to start over, to learn to fight. I want to contribute to what you're doing here. Caroline took the envelope, surprised by its weight. Inside were bank drafts, property deeds, legal documents establishing a trust. The amount was staggering, more money than the ranch would see in a decade. This is my late husband's fortune, rebuilt through careful investment, and some contributions from other women who've been where we've been. Elizabeth looked at the children playing in the yard, at the women working the gardens, at the life blooming in this unlikely place. I was wrong to attack you, but maybe something good can come from something bad. You killed Henry Dalton. I ended him, Elizabeth corrected. There's a difference. He was going to kill you, your family, burn everything you'd built. I stopped him. Consider it my apology." Caroline studied the woman who'd been her enemy, seeing the steel that had always been there beneath the surface, now forged into something purposeful rather than vengeful. "Stay for dinner," Caroline said finally. "Meet the women. See what your money will support." "I'd like that." That evening, as the extended family and Elizabeth gathered around the massive table Ethan had built to accommodate their growing numbers, Caroline told the story. The real story, complete and honest. The mail-order bride rejected 3 times. The marriage of convenience that became love. The battles fought and won. The sanctuary built from necessity and stubbornness. "You were rejected for being too fierce," one of the newer arrivals said wonderingly. "But that fierceness saved us all." "Fierceness is just another word for refusing to break," Caroline replied. "Every woman here has that same fierceness. You just needed someone to show you how to use it." "To fierce women," Ethan raised his glass of water. "They didn't keep alcohol on the ranch. Too many bad memories associated with it." "To fierce women," everyone echoed. Elizabeth left the next morning, but the money stayed. With it, they built a proper dormitory for women seeking shelter, expanded the school, created a fund for women who needed to disappear and start over elsewhere. The sanctuary of Devil's Bowl Valley became legendary across the frontier, a place where desperate women could find not just shelter but strength, not just safety but skills. Years passed. Rose grew tall and strong like her mother, learning to shoot and ride and fight, but also to heal and teach and build. James became a doctor, trained by Mary Morrison and educated back east, returning to serve the valley that raised him. More children came, were raised, went into the world carrying the lessons of the sanctuary. Caroline's hair went gray, then silver, but her eyes remained fierce. Ethan's tremor worsened with age, but his aim with a rifle stayed true. They grew old together, surrounded by the family they'd built from outcasts and refugees, the love they'd forged from convenience and necessity. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ethan gave Caroline a gift. Her original advertisement, the desperate plea of a woman with nowhere else to turn, framed in silver. "Why keep this song?" she asked. "To remember where we started. To remember that the worst moments can become the best if we're brave enough to see them through." Caroline hung it in their bedroom, where she could see it each morning, a reminder that she'd once been rejected for being too fierce, too scarred, too much of a warrior. Now those very qualities had built a legacy that would outlast them both. The sanctuary continued long after Caroline and Ethan were gone, run by Rose and her children, then their children, each generation adapting to new challenges but keeping the core mission, to teach the desperate to be fierce, to show the broken how to rebuild, to prove that warriors could create as powerfully as they could destroy. And in the history of Devil's Bowl Valley, written by Anna's descendants and preserved in the school that bore her name, the story was told and retold of Caroline Mercer, who became Caroline Calloway, the mail-order bride who was too fierce for marriage until she found the one man who knew that fierceness was not a flaw but a gift, not something to be tamed but something to be partnered with. She'd been called too wild for love, too scarred for marriage, too much of a warrior for domestic life. But in the end, she'd proven that love could be wild, marriage could bear scars, and domestic life sometimes required a warrior's heart. The battle in her eyes had never dimmed. She'd simply chosen what was worth fighting for, and in choosing, had built something worth defending for generations to come. The final entry in the Valley's official history, written in Rose's careful hand, read simply, Caroline Calloway, née Mercer. Mail-order bride, warrior, mother, teacher, founder of the sanctuary. She taught us that being rejected for our strength was not a judgment on us, but on those too weak to stand beside us. She showed us that the fiercest battles are fought not with knives or guns, but with the determination to build something better from the ashes of what tried to destroy us. She was too fierce for the world she was born into, so she built a better one. May we all be so fierce.